Walpole Film Festival started in 2003 as one of the first high school film festivals in the country. The program has been recognized nationally as a model for creativity and collaboration in the classroom. Students in the program are required to follow each step in modern independent digital filmmaking. This includes screenwriting, acting, art direction, shooting on digital cameras, editing on professional software, and composing original music. The festival culminates each year with a red carpet ceremony that celebrates the achievements of each crew. To learn more about this year's Walpole Film Festival and how to become a sponsor, please visit our website, walpolefilmfestival.com. Thank you and enjoy the movie.
This little town needed a more powerful name than the Hilltoppers.
It had the air of rebellion. It was the 1960s. There's a lot of rebellion going on everywhere, anti-war, women's movement, civil rights. So I think in that spirit, the rebel name and the rebel air and the rebellion were developed.
The legendary football coach that built this program, John Lee, came from Memphis, Tennessee, Overton High School in 1968. And the athletic teams had already been changed from the Hilltoppers to the Rebels when he got here. That was around 65 or 66. That's the way it was explained to me. Then the Rebel flag, Dixie, that all came, with Coach Lee. So in 72 it was in place. I didn't think a thing of it because there was no racist intent to it. It was kind of just a football thing, and it basically, at least within our town, there were no complaints against it. It was not controversial. I never noticed what other teams we were playing thought, and I don't think they thought much of it. Everything seemed to be fine.
He had been, he was a Massachusetts native, but had been coaching in Tennessee for a school district that was known as the Rebels, and they used the Confederate flag, and he brought that with him, turned around a football program. So he created his own sense of pride.
I think Walpole had a bit of a renaissance in our sports program, starting in the late 60s, the early 70s and 80s. We had dominant teams in many, many boys and girls sports. The girls sports rose just as fast as the boys sports. And the football program was one of the best in the state, if not the nation. So I think there was a lot of people within the town. I think the town was waiting to get behind high school sports, and when we started to win and do much better, I think the whole town identified with Rebels.
But of course, in the South at this time, probably the most popular, one of the most popular symbols of resistance against the civil rights movement for white Southerners is the Confederate flag. And so it's interesting to sort of follow how what's happening in the South and how the flag is being used as a symbol of what they called massive resistance against civil rights, how that begins to filter into some northern communities.
It became a popular symbol, in large part because of that resistance to civil rights. So I have to think that, even if people weren't explicit about it in Walpole, that there was a kind of an awareness that it was being used in that context, that it had some association to that.
Back then, the Confederate flag was a large part of the environment. My particular years, it wasn't part of the uniform. It eventually became, the flag was on the shoulder patch, but it was painted on the stone wall, as you've seen. It was painted on the press box. The band carried a Confederate flag when they played. People in the stands had them. It was just a part of the spirit. To be honest with you, no, it never had any racial connotations whatsoever when I was playing.
I didn't have the sense that it was about not accepting others. We sang the songs, but there was no meaning to that part for me that was with the South. Even when I was in school, I didn't have that association and didn't feel like it was a part of our high school community or the community itself.
So I don't think there were ever any negative intentions at any point at the beginning or the end of this process. I think it was all innocent enough, but hell is paved with good intentions. And while the original intentions may have been innocent and positive, I think the results were less so.
In 1986, we started a self-study for accreditation, and some townspeople and some teachers brought up the fact that they were uncomfortable with the rebel flag. And so as part of our reaccreditation in 1988, the rebel flag as a symbol of Walpole was ended. Now, it took a few years for it to slowly get off of uniforms, and some kids still brought it back, but it was, I think, slowly dying out. In the 90s and through the early 2000s, it became a point of contention in many states because the rebel flag was part of their heritage and they wanted to leave it on their state flags, and it became a political flashpoint, and rightly so, I think. And so I think that was even more reason for us to try to eradicate it, being a symbol of Walpole. I think about 5 or 6 years ago, when we put the lights up at the high school, our neighbor, who had grown up as a rebel and had served in Vietnam and was a veteran and had every right under freedom of speech, but he put up the flag right against the fence of the football field, so that everybody coming in would see it. And a lot of people came in and were very angry because they thought that it was put up there by us. It was our symbol, even though we had disavowed that since 1988. It's still there. This past year it was not lit up and has not been lit up. And we hope it'll eventually be taken down.
You know, what happened down in South Carolina back in June, I think was the catalyst for the discussion we're having right now. That's not to say that this hasn't come up in the past. I believe it was 1994, the school committee made a decision that the flag would not be used in any way by the school.
I guess the unfortunate other piece is that there are people that know and understand that and choose to continue to use that image. Some people might say that the Confederate flag doesn't mean that to them, that it's a cultural thing about the South, or kind of, again, this whole anti-establishment sort of image. To those people, I would say that you can't choose the meaning for your symbol. Somebody's already done that.
Because there's a history here, and that kids and adults, people in general, have trouble separating the fact that they're proud of their town and their school or their sports team, and there is no other symbol.
Probably naively and just ignorantly, a lot of my teammates and classmates, we were the Walpole Rebels with the flag on our uniforms, and we didn't, we weren't conscious of the larger image.
Well, now looking back on it, I see and listen to a little bit of the history of it, I see why the flag is a problem, and since 1988 we have not been associated with having any part of our uniforms or anything in the crowd and stuff with the Confederate flag has been asked to take down or removed and stuff.
It was a natural, when the name Rebels came, that became synonymous with the program. Everyone wanted to be a rebel. You see all the little kids that come to the games, and they want to grow up to be a rebel. So I think we are identified with the name, and personally I don't think there's any reason to change it. But if we had called ourselves something else, I think at that point in time we still would have had the success.
I do enjoy having the Rebel name as my town and sports team mascot, just because of the fact that I grew up in this town, as I said, for 18 years, and I've lived up to just working for that Rebel name on the front of our jerseys.
And it's always felt like the Rebel name and the Rebel colors are something that you earned. It wasn't ever given to you. You earned it by getting on a varsity field.
It's just always having that pride of Walpole being with you, because it's the name that's on the jersey, not the person that's wearing the jersey. So I think whenever I'm out on the court or out on the field or doing the news for that matter, it's always representing Walpole to the best of my ability.
It meant a lot to me, to wear that same uniform, that like my sister did and have that Rebel name.
I think maybe because possibly some of these kids, or some of the students, or some of the players, their parents were graduates of Walpole High when at that time it was all right to have the Dixie flag or the Dixie song and the Rebels and stuff. And I would say a lot of it has to do with what their parents, how they were brought up.
Yeah, well, like I said, I mean, I can understand why some people would say, even though just taken on its own terms, the word rebel doesn't have to be racist. I understand that. But like I said, I do think it's hard. I mean, I can see why people then would make the argument that they don't even want the word rebel because it got associated in the history of the town.
My feeling is that while I enjoyed having that, the people in the stands having the flag, the band having the flag, the band used to play Dixie when we would score a touchdown. We used to sing Dixie in the bus. There's no place for that anymore.
Yeah, I still have people to this day, when I tell them, that I coach in Walpole or teach in Walpole, they'll ask me, do they still sing Dixie at some of the games? Which is interesting. It hasn't been done in so long, but it's still kind of the perception that they have that it's still done here.
It was a sign of unity, a sign of team spirit, a sign of history of the Rebel program, and that's why you celebrated under it.
And this was 2009, and people were still waving Confederate flags.
Yeah. So this was 2009, 2008, or technically December 2008, right, is when we won the state championship, 13-0. I mean, I remember singing Dixie after the state championship.
I think the Rebel name in today's, in 2016, is very vanilla. It's very benign. Maybe if you go back 45 years, maybe you wouldn't have that same opinion. But 45 years is a long time ago.
And we were generally successful, I think, in keeping the flag at bay. Every now and then it would sort of sneak in around the edges. But we were pretty successful, and I thought the student body was very understanding of the fact that it really wasn't the sort of thing that we wanted to have associated with or to represent us in our school.
As a town, I believe that we have done all we possibly can to show that we do not associate our names with the Confederate flag as Walpole High School. And in the student code of conduct and athletic policies, that there is a strong stating saying that athletes may not represent or show any hate or feelings for the Confederate flag, and that's something that you sign at the beginning of each year.
But I don't see it around the school. And I set up after gut camp, the summer training program, the first day of football practice before we test that first morning, strength test, speed test, all that stuff. They get a set of rules. And one of the rules is, I am not going to see a Confederate flag anywhere on school grounds from any of you guys. And they look at me like, geez, we don't even have one. So the thing is, but I have to mention it. It sets the record straight, but I just don't see it as a problem.
Since I become athletic director, I've gone around to more sports and been around the locker rooms, those locker rooms more, and I haven't seen a Confederate flag around.
We never had Rebel gear issued to us in the form of, we never got Rebel flags or Confederate flags or headbands, but guys definitely would wear them, right? It was part of the culture.
I still see in school
kids with Confederate flag lanyards, people post Confederate flag Snapchat stories, even after that. So it's clearly not enough what we're doing now. We need to continue to make a change.
I know a couple of us, we facilitated the purchase of, I don't know, let's call it 25 or 30 rebel flags that had the little hunter guy from like the Looney Tunes right on the center of the flag. And so, you know, we're winning the state championship, beating Mansfield, and people are waving, you know, 10,000 people, and you've got Walpole kids waving the rebel flag in the stands, and we were jazzed about that.
At our football field, there is a Confederate flag that's outside of our property line, and people, you know, they associate, they see that, and we, you know, our name happens to be the Rebels, and you know, they still closely associate that with us.
Recognizing that my children would be playing on the field, I thought, if a visitor was to come here, how are they going to look at my son, who is playing for Walpole High, on a field that the Confederate flag is sitting right there?
Over the years, I know I've received a number of questions, usually from people outside of the town who come to visit with sports teams. You know, why do, especially since the gentleman on the, you know, overlooking the football field put that flag up. I'll get that question, why are you waving that flag in your school? You know, and you know, I'm like a broken record. I continuously tell people, you know, that's not our property, that's private property.
Even though it was on private property, I think it was an embarrassment to the town. We spent more time explaining it away than, you know, any, the homeowner may have had a right to display it, but I think it was the wrong thing to do. It sent the wrong message to the town. It sent the wrong message to our visitors.
You know, it's still a thorn in my side as a school administrator to see a private citizen impact the reputation or the perceived reputation of a community. That I think it's unfortunate. I think it isn't deserved. And I think it's now dragging the rebel name into that same sewer.
We did put up a sign in front of that flag. It was a wooden sign on a pedestal that explained that this was on private property. That lasted, I believe, 24 hours, and it was vandalized.
I think that it is still connected with the Confederate flag because it's, then again, like the Confederate flag just came down not that long ago, but I think that slowly it is starting to become distant because I think, like, you ask, majority of people in Walpole High School will tell you that they don't like the Confederate flag.
It's not really, maybe it's me because I've been here so long, but it's not really a thing that really pops up when I think of Walpole anymore. It's more just going to school, a lot of people in the community are really nice, everyone's really kind out here, and so I don't really think the town should distance itself from it, but I think it's, now that it is down, it's kind of in the past, and it's whatever at this point.
Obviously the word rebel has other connotations that don't involve the Confederacy and the Civil War, but we chose to make that connection by embracing the use of the flag and the song Dixie and the colors and all that.
We had Metco students on the team. We had African-American kids from Boston who played on our team. And I don't even think anyone thought to ask them whether it bothered them or not. They never said anything about it, so I don't know. But again, it never registered with me as a player or student that it had any racial connotations or overtones at all.
I haven't heard anyone really complain to me about the name, okay? As I said earlier, as they go out into the wider world and they understand how others may look at that name from a different perspective, then they gain additional education, which is not always pinpointed here in school, because to us, to the Walpole community, I don't think they see it as a racist name, okay? So again, we're in our own little world. We're isolated right here in Walpole. We are thinking what we're thinking. There's nothing wrong with it. But in the wider world, that is when you see a difference.
On the paraphernalia that my teams receive, we do not put the name Rebels or any rebel imagery. There are two reasons for this. First was as a younger man, I had the opportunity to play in a band and travel the country. And at one show in Newark, New Jersey, I was wearing a Walpole Rebels shirt. I was accosted by 4 men in a Burger King who were African American, didn't really like that imagery. That wasn't a pleasant experience. And then subsequently at a show in North Carolina, I was wearing a Walpole Rebels shirt around the hotel. There were a number of other bands staying in the hotel. I was invited back to a party in one room with a bunch of people who saw my shirt and thought I shared a similar ideology. I'm invited back to the room. It turned out there was a white power group, and they were listening to the country artist Johnny Rebel. You can Google his material, and you can see how patently offensive that is.
Interesting, my family and I moved here to Walpole about 10 years ago, and we were looking for a daycare for my son, and we went to a house. The people were really nice in there, and we were leaving, and I noticed a Confederate flag in the backyard. And it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit, because I grew up in the city. I grew up in Boston, and I never saw a Confederate flag hang anywhere. So I just didn't know why they had it there, and I kind of knew the meaning of what the Confederate flag was, and I wasn't sure why they had it there.
It was a white person, went down south, didn't think anything about the name or the flag, but it had an entirely different connotation down south when he went to school than what he had up here. So he came back to visit the school, and he saw my office, and he stepped in and just had a brief conversation with me about his experience. And he was shocked as to how other people outside of the Walpole community view the flag, and that to him was very shocking.
Other towns really think that most of people in Walpole love the Confederate flag, and we hang it up and we bring it everywhere, but I don't think that they realize that majority of students agree with the fact that we need to get rid of the Confederate flag.
It's not someone just saying, well, I don't really like this. It's not about what you like and don't like. It's about the fact that you feel uncomfortable because an important but a terrible part in our history is being perpetuated in a small town in Massachusetts. It doesn't make sense that we are keeping this symbol alive.
It's just a word, but people say words can't hurt you. They can. Obviously, this is a word that's creating a lot of conversation.
If you're not aware of the history, then I think that point that I was saying about all those layers, you kind of miss. And then somebody can say, well, I like this symbol, and to me it just means this. And so I don't care what you say about slavery and racism and all that, because to me it means this. But I think once you understand that it's a very complicated symbol that does have all those layers, then you would realize that there's probably a lot of people out there, and probably a lot of African Americans especially, for whom it's impossible to just say, oh, it's a symbol of being defiant or something like that, that it's so bound up with something that's really hateful.
It's really about who you are rather than what you're called. You're still going to be from the same great school and the same great community of Walpole, and that's the important thing.
I've often used the phrase, it's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Okay, we want to get rid of the flag. Do we really want to get rid of the rebel name? Now, I know there are certain people who would say, yes, we do. The rebel name, flag aside, is negative, is something we would like to have gone. The feedback that I have received from alumni, from current students, from community members, is that the majority of people at this point are not in favor of getting rid of the rebel name.
And I believe the students renamed this high school in the 60s, and I think it's the responsibility of the students and present and past, and possibly future students, to deal with a name at this point in time.
In today's world, the term rebel in Walpole today, not 1975, but today, I think the controversy is much ado over nothing.
But you can't take away the rebel name. It's too much pride, too much attached to the name, and I think it would ruin high school for a lot of kids.
I've been a coach. I'm an official now. I'm the parent of 4 Walpole High School athletes. All the people that I come into contact with and speak with about the subject, all generally feel the same way. It's the name invokes a feeling of pride for the town, a pride for the school.
I'm definitely still in favor of the rebel name. I think there's, and again, maybe this is just me, but I think there's a hugely growing sensitivity to words on the whole. And again, it's that same thing as having the rebel flag, right? There are different historical levels of impact of a word, of a name, of a symbol.
I think there's no reason to change the rebel name. I think the rebranding that we're talking about could very well have a Revolutionary War theme. As I pointed out before, there is a Revolutionary War cemetery only 50 yards behind the high school where 3 Revolutionary War veterans are buried. We have a rich history of men who served in both the Civil War and the Revolutionary War, so we could certainly be rebels without having anything to do with the Confederate flag.
And to me, it's all about the name Walpole, not the word rebels. My kids play youth sports, and they chant Walpole when they chant. So I don't think no matter what we change our name to, it's not going to matter. I think the town itself, the word Walpole means something, and that has more pride, I think, than the word rebel.
It's, I think a school and a town should err on the side of limiting the anguish and the negativity for a few rather than just pleasing and, kind of continuing on for the many.
Think about what we're saying. It's the rebel name that brought all these successes. It's not. It's the people behind the name that are making the successes. It's the students that are making whatever it is that they're doing, the paper or robotics or whatever. It's the students that are really doing a great job.
And I bet you $20, my kids are probably going to grow up here also.
Think they'll be rebels too?
I don't know. I mean, if we can get rid of the Confederate flag, then yeah, they'll be rebels, and I'll be able to tell them that I went to high school when there was a Confederate flag hanging over the football field. But hopefully they'll be rebels. That'd be kind of cool to all have that same connection to the rebel name.